Hey, what's up, guys? So today I wanted to talk about a couple things that we've learned, a little bit of news. I haven't put anything up for a little bit because there hasn't been anything. There hasn't been any news that I've been interested in making something about. So the things today are two, minor things, I guess. But yeah, so the first thing is that the Xbox, initially people were saying that the Xbox was going to have two versions of the new Xbox. Like, you're going to have a cheaper version, and then you're going to have the more expensive version. And the code names they threw out, I absolutely hate. Anaconda was the code name for the top of the line one. And then the code name for the other one was Lockhart, which is absolutely such a stupid name. And people really ran with that, and it's like, guys, we're a year out or more. Like, there's no reason to, you can't make any assumptions about any of this kind of stuff. Because there's just no way. So yeah, anyway, this is Destiny 2 in the background. I forgot to say that, because you couldn't tell. I just started playing it, so I'm really low level right here, but I have really low level stuff. And I don't really play much on my PC anymore, so my aim and movement are a little bit off. But, people just ran with this. Like, it was one of those things where last year at E3, Phil Spencer said that Microsoft was, quote, hard at work on the next consoles with an S on the end, and people took that and ran with it. And then they took that as fact, and then this rumor came out about the two different SKUs of Xbox, one lower end, one higher end, and people just ran with that. And, I mean, as measured and as careful as these corporate guys are with every single word they say, like, if you watch Phil Spencer in interviews and stuff, he's a relatively loose guy. Like, he's pretty, he's pretty relaxed. So, I think what they intended to say was that they had consoles plural in development, meaning obviously it was a year ago, so they're like 2 years out from the console at that point. Like, they don't know what the final console or the final specs or the final hardware is going to look like. So they wouldn't have had any way to know and say, like, oh, we're going to have, this one console and then a second console also. Like, I don't think that's what was going on. I think it was just more the case of, like, he was saying consoles, much like if you were producing a car, you'd come up with prototypes, plural. You'd come up with multiple prototypes, and then eventually one of those would become the next car. And so I think that's what ended up happening, and people just ran with this thing, and they've been running with it for months now. And at first it seemed like a good idea, and I thought, like, that kind of makes sense, I guess. But then I started thinking about it, and I started realizing, like, that's actually really bad. I hope they don't do that. And the reason is this, I'm not elitist, but at the same time, I'm realistic about the way things work, and if you're going to have a lower power console for people who, don't want to spend the money or whatever, or are more casual, that only hurts everybody, because then developers have another, a lower end console they have to work for also. Because you can't just develop for the highest end and then just, hope it works on the lower end one. Like, you have to do work for both, and I think that would have been a mistake for them to do that. To do a lower end console and a higher end console, I think that would have been a mistake. It would have held back games, and honestly, guys, like I said, I'm not elitist, but at some point, like, you have to just buy it. Either buy it or don't. I mean, there's none of this like, oh, I'm gonna buy it, but it's $500. That's too expensive for me. If only they made a cheap version that I could afford. Like, that's just not how things work. I mean, it is how business works because they want to make more money, so of course they're going to do that, but it's just detrimental to the console gaming experience in general because, like right now, if everything was, based just on the X, the One X, then the games would be so much better. The One X and the Pro, the games would be so much better, but they still have to develop games for the base consoles. They still have to develop the games for the PS4 regular and the Xbox One regular, or the One S. So, like, we're not getting as much innovation as we could have because we're held back by those older ones, and it's always been that way. And, I get they want inclusiveness, I get they want continuity, I get they want it so that, like, not everybody's going to pay that early adopters tax and get this thing, day one and spend $500 on it and stuff. I get that. And a lot of people don't have that kind of money, and a lot of people are students, and a lot of people have a lot of other expenses and all that kind of stuff. But, at the same time, like, it's just... That's my point. Like, if you can't afford it, then you can't afford it. They shouldn't make a crappy entry-level console that's really cheap just so that other people can get on board. And especially if it's all going to be backwards compatible. Like, the rumors are saying that I don't know if you can call them rumors. Microsoft was saying it, but you can basically say that all the Xbox One games are going to work on the next generation console. So it's like there's not really any reason for them at this point with that, coupled with this xCloud thing, which is the game streaming, where you can basically stream the game onto like a phone even. There's really no need to come up with a crappier level console because you can just stream the console to your One S if you didn't want to upgrade, or your One X or whatever. So I think really, you know, maybe initially they had that idea, but I think at this point they've realized that that's, you know, probably doesn't really, I don't know, it just doesn't really make sense. And, you know, if this next generation is all about the power, and it's all about the ingenuity, and it's all about the generational leap in hardware, then creating a console that's only half a generation better than what we have now is really not going to help anything. It's just going to make things worse. And, you know, just make the experience worse. And, again, I say, without trying to sound elitist, like, if you can't afford it, then you can't afford it. There's nothing else. Like, you know, people who can't afford a Porsche don't complain because they have to end up with a Volkswagen. Like, that's just, if you can't afford a Porsche, then you can't afford it. Porsche is not going to make a cheap, crappy entry-level Porsche that's not really a Porsche just to satisfy the people who want to afford one but can't. You know, I mean, that's just, you know, you have to kind of move your way up and get up there. And if you think about it, you know, in money terms, like, I bought my One X, my Xbox One X, and by all accounts, I have basically not played it at all compared to what I used to play. As many games as I used to play, as many hours as I used to play in a day, I basically haven't played it at all. But even if you looked at only one game, which would be Black Ops 4, don't include World War II or any of those other games, or Forza 7. Even if you just looked at Black Ops 4, I've got like 550, 600 hours in that game. So even if you accumulated, or even if you accounted for the cost of the console at $500 and the cost of Black Ops 4 at, I think I bought the season pass to $100, so $600. If I've gotten 600 hours out of that, that means that entertainment for me was $1 an hour over the life of the console. And I've only had it, I haven't even had it for 2 years yet. I got it in November of 2017, so it hasn't even been 2 years yet. So it's like, you know, gaming is one of the hobbies that really provides the most bang for your buck, honestly. And I tell people like that I work with that because a lot of them go out and drink and party and do all that kind of stuff. And it's like, dude, you know how cheap my hobby is? I buy a $60 game and I play it for 500 hours. And that's like the least amount I'll play a game. Like, that's an unbelievable value for money. So, you know, I mean, $500 for a console is not that much compared to what we're going to get with this next generation. And honestly, I'm glad they're not doing two consoles because it would really hold the consoles back. And I don't want that. I want a true generational leap, and I don't want to be gimped by, you know, trying to cater to the people that can't afford the new console. I mean, I'm sorry. If you can't afford it, then you can't. So the other thing is that PlayStation recently, or Sony recently, filed they reapplied for a patent that they have had since 2012, and this patent relates to the way games are loaded. So just to be clear, they had the patent already from 2012, and they basically haven't done anything with it because we haven't seen this yet in a console. And, you know, I think it's possibly a hardware limitation and just a money thing, but I think this is probably something that will happen in the next gen, and that's kind of what the expectation is right now because they reapplied for the patent. Now, you should know that corporations, especially like Sony, file huge amounts of patents. They file patents for basically everything. They're reapplying. They're constantly filing patents. So, you know, maybe this is just an anomaly that doesn't mean anything, but the patent basically is talking about the way they load games and the way they want to segment the game into different chunks so that there's no seamless, you know, so that there's a seamless experience. So let's use Grand Theft Auto for an example because it's in a big open world. What they want to do is they want to only load a smaller portion of the map at a time and then use software to basically figure out, like, if you're heading in a certain direction, once you get to a certain threshold, then it'll start loading the next portion of the map. So by the time you get there, it's already loaded. And there's no loading. There's not going to be a stutter like when you cross over the boundary in a new area and stuff. And I think with the new consoles, with an SSD, I think this is really going to become a big deal. And I think Sony will probably also use virtual RAM with the hard drive. They'll probably use the hard drive as like a cache of sorts. So there might be like 100 gigabytes reserved on the hard drive just for caching games so that you can basically avoid it. And from the sounds of it, and we heard Microsoft talk about this, and we've heard Sony talk about this at length too, but they basically want to make it so that there's virtually no loading. And you say virtually no loading, like their goal is to make it so that you don't ever have to sit at a loading screen under any circumstances. And that's actually really sick. That's a game changer, you know? one of the problems I've had with games for years, and I have this problem specifically with Call of Duty, although I don't play Call of Duty all that much anymore, but one of the things that I remember so fondly about, like, you know, it probably stopped with around, like, Black Ops 2, I think, probably, but, like, Modern Warfare 3 was the best example because I played that game so much. When you wanted to play that game, like, if you know, if I said, hey, man, you want to play Modern Warfare 3? Yeah, let's do it. You turn it on, you sign into the game, you go to multiplayer, you hit find match, and you search team deathmatch, and within 60 seconds, you're in a lobby, and the game's counting down, and it's starting. And you could just stay in that lobby for, you know, hours and hours. And it used to be the same with Forza 5 when I was racing that heavily when the Xbox One first came out. You just hop on, and within, like, you know, a minute, 2 minutes, you're in a game, in a lobby, already playing. And you just play for hours and hours and hours in the same lobby. You never have to leave, you never have to research, you never even have to go through a menu. And that's a really good experience. It's like a very seamless experience of just enjoying the game for long periods of time without having to do anything. But it seems like every game today just has all kinds of issues, like matchmaking takes too long, the loading screen takes too long, you know, the game takes too long to actually, like, queue you up and put you in a game, and then the console takes too long, and then something happens and the game crashes and you have to restart it, and then maybe you have to restart the console in general. I mean, it's just like a lot of different stuff like that, and I feel like that's one of the losses of gaming that people don't talk about very much. You know, people talk about microtransactions, and they talk about, you know, upgrades and graphics, and they talk about, like, you know, lack of customization, all this kind of stuff, but really people don't talk about the seamless experience that we used to have of just, like, everything worked all the time, and you didn't have to wait at screens. There was no, like, hoops to jump through to get your games to work and play, and, you know, that's what I really hope we see out of the next generation. It sounds like they're going in that direction. It sounds like they really want that. You know, things like pre-downloading the games before they come out on, like, say, a Thursday, the fact that it pre-downloads on, like, Sunday to Monday, so that it's already ready when the game comes out. These are steps in the right direction, and these are things that have been happening this generation, and will continue and get better the next generation, along with the hard drive and all that kind of stuff. So that looks like that's the direction we're going, and I'm super thrilled about that, and that's what I can't wait for. Seamless gaming again, guys. So, anyway, let me know what you think. Thanks for being here. Catch you in the next one.